Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, do we have a treat for you today. Before I introduce you our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. We both, parentheses, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, insist on a lot of time being available almost every day to just sit and think. That is very uncommon in American business. We read and think. Charles T. Munger. Today, our guest, staple in the Culture Matters podcast, the real Brian Hess, is here to um, unpack a tribute to our dear friend, Charles T. Munger, who's influenced all of you on the Culture Matters podcast. If you listen to this podcast, whether you realize it or not, November 28th, Charles graduated life at 99 years old. Our guest today, Brian Hess, has brought many of the energies and consciousness and traits of exemplifying leadership from the great Charles into his organization, founded a handful of years ago, the Pavement Group, top contractor school. Thousands of people have benefited from Brian's stewardship, and you've benefited. If you listen to this show, if you heard him on the show, then you clearly like the show. If you haven't, I don't know if you've ever listened to it or maybe someone's forced you to do it. Brian is a mentor, a leader, role model, and today, the perfect person to talk about the life well lived of our friend, Charles T. Munger, who is now in a better place. Thanks for coming on, Brian S.
It's always good to be here, brother. And I would correct you and say he passed on at 99 years young, Charles,
Boom.
because he was sharp to the very end, brother. Even though maybe his physical being wasn't quite as sharp, his mind was unbelievably sharp to the very end. And so if I were to look back at my life at 99 years old and say that it was well lived, that's one of the things that I love the most. You know, my grandmother on my dad's side was 92 years old, and my dad needed my grandfather's social security number for something. He had passed away 20 something years prior, and she rattled it off like that, man. Same thing. So
Wow.
even though her body wasn't the greatest at 92, her mind was super sharp. And so that's my goal. I know it's your goal, is to keep the mind sharp. Hopefully we can keep the body sharp too. But man, a life well lived from our friend Charlie Munger.
You know, what do you think is the biggest lesson you've gotten from Charlie?
Ooh, that's a hard one to pick out one. I would say the thing that I've learned, because it's also hard to separate what you've learned from Charlie from what you've learned from Berkshire as an organization, right?
Yeah.
Me, they go like one and the same almost. The thing that I've learned from Berkshire, the model, and I mean Charlie speaks on this quite a bit as well, is the idea of the value of capital, you know, the value of cash specifically in a business. You know, when you look at Berkshire as a whole, the way that they operate is very different from traditional American businesses, and I believe that they get it right, and so many American businesses get it wrong. You know, they don't speak to, you know, constantly leveraging everything and doing things the way that most businesses do, and you know, from a standpoint of how most businesses operate, I'll just use this example. You know, specifically in construction, man, people buy equipment at the end of a season, you know, at the end of a year, just to not pay taxes. And one of the things that I've learned from, you know, reading the University of Berkshire Hathaway, the Berkshire Hathaway shareholders books, um, Poor Charlie's Almanac, is that the, you know, the value of living in a capitalist society and having the opportunity to do what we do, we're supposed to pay taxes, and it doesn't mean we should pay the government more than what we should. But I have stopped all thoughts of, trying to avoid taxes by further extending, capital investments, meaning like you can buy something today for $600,000 or $1 million, and you can reduce your tax liability this year, but you just increase your capital responsibilities in the future. And it's so damaging to businesses. And those two guys made that so inspiring to watch, the way that they've operated with delayed gratification, the way that they've just been okay being different. And, that's, for me, it's one of the things that I think stands out about our business at this point, is that we only make very intentional investments. They have nothing to do with whether or not we're going to pay taxes or not. They have to do with what's right for the business. And I think that has put us in an incredible position that most companies won't ever be in, because they don't understand the value of real capital and cash.
Man, did you just blow on something so heavy? What about this? Let's say that the person, an entrepreneur, does exactly what you just said. And so you said let me make sure I paraphrase this correctly. So let's say mitigate the accountability from the government. They're investing in something, right? Or investing in something that comes with a greater cost later. Well, my next question that popped up was, what if there are people associated with that? So the relationship between the organization and the people associated with it, let's say hires, was based on a premise of the leadership not wanting to serve their community and like a deep sense, right? Not serving, like not being accountable to the government, like making that investment just to avoid something. So being reactive. Now there's people hired. So it's not like I'm hiring you, because I see you do this all the time. You're gonna try to hire somebody because you see something in them. And then it's like, all right, let me get this great person to the table, and then we'll figure out how to grow the organization to their talent. That's very different than, well, I just made this big investment to pay less taxes. Oh, let me hire two people too. And then as soon as things get bad, let me get rid of them really fast. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think those psychologies are associated at some level. And I'm curious if you could help speak to that, or what your thoughts are on that. Like, I'm so self-centered. Of course, I'm not going to be there with my people. Like, the order matters. I'm trying. I'm having a hard time articulating this, I feel, but
it's so true, man. Like, the thing that comes to mind is that so many people, I was just having this thought last night. I was thinking about, how much capital we actually need for next year, what that looks like. And I started thinking about, like, the way that we do things with hiring new employees, for example. In the beginning of our business, when capital was less abundant, we would make sure that we had, 6 months worth of the capital that it took to hire an employee, set aside. We had that, ready to go. And many times that was, closing a large project or something like that. We would make, $100,000, $200,000 from project or projects. And so we knew that those people would be safe. But what I think most businesses do, because they say, the word risk is thrown around a lot when it comes to, well, you have to be willing to risk in order to hire employees or to do these things. And it's like, no, it's only risk if you don't operate your business in a way that allows you to see the clear path that's ahead, which, to your point, man, it's like people come first always. The other investments are paid for only by people. A piece of equipment in construction certainly is required to be able to do a job, but that piece of equipment can be rented. It can be, there's a million different ways to acquire that piece of equipment. There's only one way to acquire employees. And so those investments, when they get done backwards, the stress that's put on a business from leverage is a real problem, because it starts to dictate all the decisions, whether that's conscious or subconscious. That's what happens. And so I believe, Charlie and Warren, those two men, are a great example of how to put things in the right order when it comes to how to manage money and how to invest that money accordingly. When you consider, and dude, use this theory as an example. Those guys go and attempt to acquire businesses at a great value, right? That's their entire investing model, is to go find great businesses at a value. I do the same thing with people because I'm able to see in people a value that other people don't see. And so I can go acquire a business, meaning a person, for a great value because somebody else doesn't see their gift. And by the way, neither do they. And maybe their gift isn't even uncovered yet, right? Maybe that's why the value is so great to me, but it has not yet caught up with the marketplace, the value of this individual, because it needs to be uncovered. And I believe they see the same thing in businesses. They see a business that, like, wow, we can offer all of these missing pieces to this business that fills in these gaps, and it's going to multiply the value of that business. And that's why we want to buy it. And so from a people perspective, that's what I believe we do, is that we find those people who are looking for those missing pieces that our organization can provide and amplify. And man, it's worked out time and time and time again, right? People look at me like I'm crazy when we do it. And then, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, it looks like a really great decision. But that all starts with, and again, to give credit to, the knowledge that I've gained from Charlie and Warren, it all starts with being able to have the capital to do that, and we wouldn't have that if we were investing into anything to avoid paying taxes, because we would be missing, 60 something percent of the capital and cash that we have available to deploy if we did that. So if you think about that, the amount of money that people spend in order to avoid taxes, people don't even understand tax strategy at all. And these guys do a great job of selling it. The way that I explain it to people that ask me is, to me, the way that these guys describe it is taxes are the toll that you pay to drive on the highway of capitalism. And if you don't want to pay that toll, then you don't deserve to, be able to play in that same sandbox, because that's what capitalism is. And if you think you're going to beat the government, just study a little bit more about how it actually works. So that $1 million piece of equipment that you buy, you're paying $70,000 or $80,000 just in sales tax generally to acquire it. And so then you have a payment, then you have interest on top of that payment. Then you have all these things. Like, trust me, the math does not work in your favor. It only works in your favor for today. So if you think that's an advantage, just take your ass down the street and go to the payday loan place and ask them for, a couple $100,000 at 20%, and you'll get the same result.
You think the people come before that?
They have to. They have to, because an organization is nothing without people. If you study, I think that it's said in any Berkshire book or any shareholder letter, but it needs to be said, in my opinion, far more, is that everything they do is based on the people, right? Every business they acquire, they're evaluating the leadership. Every business that they speak of, there are specific people that operate those businesses that make them great. And so as leaders in business, as investors in business, because that's ultimately what we become, not just an employee of our own companies, but also an investor in our own companies. So when I think of, if I'm going to leave $1 million in my own business, I look at it the way that Charlie and Warren would look at it. Like, how much of a return am I going to get on that investment? If I'm going to get a 3 to 5 times return on that capital within a few years, well, I'd be pretty stupid not to leave that money in the business. But the only thing that can multiply that money is people. It's talent. It's the ability to go out and network and business develop and sell and market, and then process all of that through an incredible operations team with a good customer experience. And it's at the core of everything that these guys did to build, arguably the largest, most successful investing business of all time, right? Just the way that they have done it is different than everybody else. You can't compare them to the other people that do it different but similar, because those people, there's a different approach there. There are people out there that invest in businesses, quote unquote, invest in businesses, and their sole goal is to extract every ounce of capital out of that business that they possibly can. And it's, a lot of what's wrong in America today with businesses is that those businesses are being taken advantage of. And you would never see that in Berkshire. You would never see those businesses being taken advantage of for the benefit of the organization.
I have a quote of Munger I'd like your. Remember that reputation and integrity are your most valuable assets and can be lost in a heartbeat. Charles T. Munger. Thoughts?
Well, I'm going to pay you a compliment here and make you uncomfortable. I believe that's you. It's how you operate, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again here. Over our years of friendship and doing business together, I've watched you sacrifice, your own financial position multiple times for the benefit of a long-term play. And that is what builds trust. It's what allows people to believe, to be able to, and listen, here's the key to business. When you can look to your right and look to your left and know that the people have the best interest of the name on the front of the jersey instead of the name on the back of the jersey, you can go extremely fast because you don't have to think about why people are there. They're there for the greater good. They're there for the right reasons. They're there for the ability to look at each other when we're old and sitting in rocking chairs, or in Charlie's case, in a wheelchair, and to say like, yeah, man, we did it. We did it. We did it with each other, for each other. We accomplished something great. We did something that was really special that probably a lot of people didn't think could be done. And there is no amount of money I wouldn't pay to sit there and listen to Warren and Charlie in their old age think about what it is that they accomplished. Because I could imagine those two as much younger men sitting there talking about what it was going to be like. And, and I know just from the outside looking in, I know that Charlie was that guy too, right? They probably gave up a lot along the way. Instant gratification, again, buying the piece of equipment instead of playing the long game, and being willing. And dude, like, it's important to note here that it takes a lot of self-confidence to play the long game. It does, because it's much easier, especially in today's world where there's so many people that are takers, right? So many people that want the instant gratification, so many people that think they need whatever vehicle it is yesterday. They need to spend every dime that they make this month so they can have a great December 2023 instead of an incredible life and legacy that we're talking about here. And so, I want to say that to you, man, because I've watched you demonstrate in real life several times, many times, the ability to play that long game. And that is, it's something that, man, if more people did it, they would get what is coming in our direction down the road, which is incredible results. Undeniable. People may not understand it at first. They may wonder what the hell you're doing. I am positive that Warren and Charlie were questioned many times, right, about what they were doing. But as long as you know in your gut, and again, when you look to your left and you look to your right and you have that trust, dude, you can move massively fast, faster than anybody else. And people wonder how you did it. And to me, that's what it is. And it's in those moments where reputation is reinforced. That's what people think of you. It's not, I just said this to somebody last night about friendship. I said, you don't get credit for being a good friend when things are good. You get credit for being a good friend and good friends are revealed in moments when things aren't perfect, when, difficulty and adversity show up. Your real friends will be there, and that's true in business too, man. It's like, you don't get credit for being a great leader, a great decision maker, a great anything in business when things are good, when the bank account's full and the forecasts are all positive and sales numbers are up. Anybody could sit in the seat and take the credit. But it's in those moments of failure, and reading about those things about Charlie and Warren are extremely beneficial too. It's like, what investments did they make that weren't great? And why? Why did they make them in the first place? What did they see? And then what did they learn? And I admire that a lot about them, man, being willing to talk about those failures. It's like, what did we do that didn't work?
I have not found a book on their failures yet. Love to write one.
Dude, it would be amazing.
Talking diversified retailing, I think that was a failure. The shoe company that they talk about.
Airline investments.
Airlines. That would be a fantastic read. That's a good point. When I had a visual when you were talking about the front of the jersey versus the back of the jersey. Did you see the Last Dance documentary?
Yeah.
I think that, like, that is a company culture, right? You know when it's there and you know when it's not there, even if you can't articulate it. Like the Last Dance, when Jordan is talking and all these different people are talking about the memories of their work together. That's what the visual that would be the example or analogy for listeners. Is like we're the Bulls.
Who's MJ?
Definitely not me. But we're like there's this bull energy in and around this whole culture. There was a mascot at the Christmas party the other night. And that's like, what is it, Sammy the Bull? What was his name? The Bull guy? In the Bull. See, I don't know enough about basketball to make this really sexy analogy.
I think Sammy the Bull is like a mob guy. Yeah.
There's a bull that jumps around. He's like a mascot. It's very funny to watch on YouTube. And at the Pavement Group Christmas party, there was a mascot there jumping around.
It's Benny the Bull is the bull.
Benny the Bull.
Sammy the Bull is literally a mob guy. Yeah.
What you said about the front of the shirt, the back of the shirt, there's somewhere going. Man, that's what makes me think. The Last Dance. What a place to what an opportunity to be a part of something like that. For me, here's another quote. The best armor of old age is a well spent life perfecting it.
Man, I'll say this: what comes to mind is how these guys lived. It's one of the things that I am actively trying to in pursuit of perfection of right now. It's like, when you're building a business in we're 5.5 years in, going on 6 years in, and it takes such a massive time commitment, and I've got 4 kids, 5th one on the way here, be here within 2 weeks. And so balancing that time and creating the space to be able to do what you said earlier, which is, spend time just thinking, man. When I'm able to get away and take some vacations, some of the best thinking, some of the best innovations that we've had as a company comes from those times. And so I know I don't have to be at a beachside resort in order to come up with great ideas. I just have to have the time and space to be able to think and process and get away from the day-to-day and all that stuff. And, that's what these two guys did. When you look at, it's why I read so much. I think it's why you read so much. It's like, man, when I look back at my life, I'm going to be the sum of what we've accomplished, but also what we've been able to hand down to others, that just think about it this way, man. Like the things that you and I work on that get passed along to my kids and eventually my grandkids, like that's what we'll leave behind. You know, we get to plant those seeds. And so these guys, you know, we sit here on a podcast talking about these guys and we call Charlie our friend. You know, we never got to spend any time with him, you know, but you still feel that connection. And if there's any inspiration of, you know, motivating people to educate, to mentor, to pass their knowledge along, to share it on social media through content, things like that, you know, this is what it's all about. It's like if I had access in my 20s to some of the information that I now have in my 40s or I had in my late 30s, I don't know where I would be, you know. I wasn't always a reader. I regret that, you know, back in my teens and in early 20s, I could have give a crap about reading. And so I lost a lot of years there. But there wasn't, you know, I wasn't ever around an environment of education, of, you know, inspiring, you know, access to things that I really loved, you know. Tried the college thing. That was, you know, didn't work for me. Didn't find it very useful. And so when you look at these guys, though, you know, there's nothing more enjoyable to me than getting to choose what it is that I read and learn. And so formal, quote unquote, formal education was not my thing. I think it's not for a lot. I think it's probably not for these guys, even though they, you know, Charlie went to Harvard Law School and, you know, had plenty of quote unquote formal education. But I would argue that any amount of formal education that guy received is nothing in comparison to the self-education that he gave himself the opportunity to have. And so when you look back at their life, like what a gift it is that the Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meetings were all recorded. What a gift it is that they're all put in a book that everybody listening can go buy, acquire, read over and over and over again. There's so much. Who thought there would be so much value in reading a financial report or a letter to a shareholder from 1964 and be able to take those business principles and apply them to 2023, 2024, 2044, if it's 20 years from now and somebody's listening to this. And that's it, man. It's that education, man, is your own investment in long term. It's understanding that your long term gets better from the seeds that you plant today. You know, they say the best time to plant a tree is yesterday. The second best time is today. Well, the best time to read a book was yesterday. The second best time is today. It's to figure out what it is that you want to learn. What do you want to be an expert in? Because again, these guys, look at their example. You know, I don't think you would want these guys doing a lot of the positions within a company. I'm assuming Warren and Charlie wouldn't be the most exceptional marketers you've ever met in your life. Just my hunch, right? They'd probably be good at it, but they wouldn't be experts because it's not where they spent their time. They played the long-term game of investing, of understanding value investing. They stayed away from every trend. You know, everybody who is a, you know, follower of Munger laughs when they hear the Munger and crypto in the same sentence, right? Because of his just absolute hysterical comments about that trend, right? His skepticism around it, because that's not who they were. It's playing the stable long game. Crypto to them is the equivalent of avoiding taxes.
I've talked to numerous people this year that have lost tremendous amounts of money in crypto. And I'm thinking, from studying Charlie and the likes of him, man, they may not have figured out how hard it is to recoup losses. The Warren says the first rule of investing is don't lose money. The second rule of investing is refer to rule number one. Like, it's a shame, right? To recoup what one's lost takes that much more time, that much more return, that gets to almost impossible levels. Here's another quote for you. A lot of people with high IQs are terrible investors because they've got terrible temperaments. And that is why we say that having a certain kind of temperament is more important than brains. You need to keep raw, irrational emotion under control. You need patience and discipline and an ability to take losses and adversity without going crazy. You need an ability to not be driven crazy by extreme success. Charlie Munger.
Yeah, EQ will always be more important than IQ. Somebody that can stay calm under pressure, that can stay calm. Here's one for you: can stay calm in the face of a massive opportunity, where they don't get too excited. I've learned this in my life. This is an acquired skill. It's the equivalent to me of how you function when you're around really important people. Are you one of these losers that gets like super excited and, embarrasses yourself because you can't handle the moment? Or, can you, because dude, you'll never be friends with somebody that you act a fool in front of, because you're so excited that, you just can't wait to get the picture instead of, actually creating a relationship. And so that's the same thing in finance. It's like, man, when you see an opportunity that's huge, can you keep your emotions about you, and can you still see through the potential negatives? What if this didn't work? What do I think wouldn't work? Right? That's one of the questions that I've been asking the team, is like, if we're going to make a decision to go and do something, let's fast forward a year from now. This project that we decided to take on failed. What is it that made it fail? What are the holes in it? What are the potential risks? And I think that's what they're talking about there, right? It's like, when you consider emotional scenarios when it comes to investing or business, it's getting too excited or getting too low when you lose. It's not being able to just process the scenario properly. And, it's one of the things that I love the most about our team is we don't really get too emotional. Not to say there's no emotion, because there is. Go back to The Last Dance. There's plenty of emotion, right? There's plenty of intensity, but it's able to be managed. It's able to be drawn in where, you don't get too out of control or irrational. And I think that's one of the many keys of business is to stay the course. It's to be able to sit in the fire. Here in Pittsburgh, we call it getting forged, when they put the steel in to make it as hard as it can possibly be. They put it in a fire and it sits in there and it gets forged. And we can get forged as people, as investors, not in a bad way, not hardened in that way, but in a way that we're able to sit in the fire and not get too emotional, not get too sideways, not get too high or too low when things go well or don't. And that is, to me, that's what I want to be around in business. I want to be around people that, no matter what's happening, we're working. We're not frozen or paralyzed, temporarily by anything that happens. And I think success is one of those things. And I've seen it. We have this year, and I don't think we have a huge problem with it, but I think it exists in our organization, right? We decided that 2024, our mantra as an organization is going to be personal excellence. And the reason for that is that it's easy to see success in an organization and think that that's your success. You can borrow that. And so for me, as the CEO of our company, as the leader of our company, I can't just claim the company's success as my own. I have to know what it is that I have done. I have to know what it is, how I would score myself as a leader, as a mentor, as a person that's pushing this organization forward. And, to me, it's easy to lose that in success. It's easy to lose your ability to separate those two. It's great to celebrate, and you need to do that, but you also need a commitment to personal excellence in order to move anything in your life forward especially in business and especially when you're on a team. And it's important to understand that like a team is made up of each individual's contribution to that team, right? Berkshire Hathaway was made up of the individual success of every individual investment that was made. And collectively, they produced a result. And I think if we get lost in that last part of that quote, if we get lost in the success, if we don't keep success in perspective, then, we can get drunk on that success. And it's how so many people lose. There's a quote thrown around by a lot of successful people that says, I know a lot more people that used to be rich than I know that are rich. I know a lot more people that used to be wealthy than I know that are wealthy. And the reason for that is this exact topic, I believe, is that people can't control their emotions when they start to have some success. They lose who they are.
You bring up a really strong point there. I wrote this down. Business success undermines self-awareness because a business is not any one person, but a group of people bringing a product or service to market that's founded by a person or a group of people, and thereby associated by and to and for those people. So there's these. So that anyway, that a business success has to undermine self-awareness without intervention, because although it's not the person or peoples that founded the country or the business or what have you, the family, it kind of is at the same time. So all right, once it starts succeeding, and all those people that doubted in the beginning and thought it was a joke are now saying, "Oh my God, look, I know that person." Now it's all the credit's going to come to the leadership. And so how do you reconcile that?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic because, what we were talking about a few minutes ago here is the individual, the visionary, the person who creates the vision in the first place can really screw that up by, getting drunk on their own success, because then the vision that was set for people is no longer clear. Then the vision is ultimately reassigned to the people. Now the people have to recreate or further the vision, and they may not be visionaries, right? Or they may not be the same as the founder. It's what we see when companies are acquired and the founder gets cashed out and things don't go so well. It's because the vision has been bought. It's been purchased.
The vision has been bought.
What has been proven over a long period of time in business is that the work has to be a collective effort. It is, to your point, it is not one individual. In fact, as an organization scales, the daily work is expanded to many, many people. And our ability to lead, inspire, motivate, create processes, hold accountable those people that are responsible for doing the work. Not that the leader doesn't do work, but the percentage of real work that gets done by leaders or leadership is very small in comparison to the people within the organization that do that. And so very interesting and complex thought that's going through my mind, but it's like, the vision is so closely held to the founder, the leadership, et cetera. And I think we undervalue that a lot in business, or we may not operate with that consciously on the top of our minds all the time. But man, the ability to deliver on the work absolutely has to happen from the people. It has to happen from those people understanding what it takes to be successful. What does success actually look like, position by position, and how are they delivering on that from the standpoint of personal excellence? Like, how are you doing? And then the leadership communicating that to the people, like actually having open and honest communication about what it takes for them to be ultimately successful. take it a step further, we just created career pathing in our organization. And I shared this with you the other day, but for the sake of the audience, I'll talk about it quick again. It's like, if you build the organization properly and you have a career pathing that's, of people at the entry level positions within the organization that want to do something else, you create an upward vacuum that people are going to push the organization from the bottom up to success because they aspire to reach their own levels of success. And the failure of the company would stand in the way of that, right? Any failure within the company would stand in the way of that. And so they create the success, the organization's push from the bottom up. And what you see so often in organizations today is that the leaders are trying to pull it from the top up. It doesn't work because it's the equivalent of what an army of ants can do. You wonder how the hell these small little things can carry extremely heavy objects. It's because they all get together, man, and they pick it up.
That's a really good point, because the leadership pulls a company, doesn't pull a company up. It shows a company up. Or maybe that doesn't sound right. Through the demonstration of the leadership's values and their labor, how they work, that the people see, that inspires up. What you're saying is what the strong management does, just to affirm your what do you call it? Your epiphany there. Career planning, I'd analogize it to upward mobility in a country. If I'm unable to get my property, feed my kid, like have kids, feed my kids, choose the schooling, follow my passions, my pursuits, I'm not able to do these things, or don't believe that I can do these things, or don't know these things exist. Why am I staying in my country? I'm going over, I heard they have a dream over there, this other place, right? The American dream. Like, so the career planning is that, to me, that upward mobility, that somebody can develop their life within the country. They can develop their life within the business, because the business is growing in a way, and educating in a way, and training in a way, and showing up in a way. The prison system works, the legislature works in a way that creates that. So I affirm that that's an inspiring thought that you shared there.
Jay Doran for president.
Ha! I got another one for you that I'd like to. This will have to be, maybe we can honor Charlie another time, because this is a lot of fun. Which is really, right, a testament to who he was, right, and what you said earlier about people when you're gone, right. So here's the last quote that we can unpack. I have some fighting words too with this quote. I think that every time you see the word EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, you should substitute the words, quote, bullshit earnings. Charlie Munger.
Dude, I was literally looking up that exact quote on my computer as you were saying it. It's one of my favorites, man. Because here's my fighting words to people out there, because there's so much going on in our world with private equity, and they really drive a lot of the EBITDA conversation, and they use it as a way to value or undervalue a company, depends on your perspective. When you start to evaluate a company and you consider the financial aspect of that, which is mostly the easiest part, when black and white is black and white, numbers are numbers. But in any organization, there's a cultural value. There's value far beyond what EBITDA shows. I could speak to that in our own company. The amount of capital that we have invested this year for things that will pay off 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road is significant. So, I agree with Charlie. I think it's a It's an easy way to tilt things in one way or another. Like, just for example, if a company is looking to exit this year and they know that the valuation is going to be based off of an EBITDA number, well, they can manipulate that number to make it look exceptional. But is it really a true number? You could do the same thing in an organization for years, right? You could falsely inflate an EBITDA number for a number of years. I mean, you can really do that, but it doesn't show the rest of the story. Real earnings over a long period of time, there's much more to it. And there's probably a lot of finance people that would love to be on this call and this podcast that would love to argue this point with us. But I think that people that agree with Charlie, and I'm one of them, and I think you're one of them too, understand what he means by that. The quote here, it says, money management, Munger said, requires people to pretend that they can do something that they can't and like what they don't. I think it's a terrible way to spend your life, but it's very well paid.
Powerful.
And so when you consider that, it's like, man, what are we really doing here? Because I believe, one of the things that's most important in business that people sometimes overlook because of the power of money or the influence of money is that you have to actually enjoy what you do, and you got to believe in the vision, and you got to keep expanding that vision, and you got to know, there's a very small number of visionaries that know what their company will look like in 5 years, that know what their company will look like in 10 years. And, for me, that's been a natural gift. I've been able to kind of see the path ahead much differently than most people. And that causes a lot of conflict, by the way, for people that think we're crazy.
And you've been humble enough, curious enough to invest in help someone that also lacks that. They're setting themselves up to need an equity partner that has the relationships, that has the resources, that has their own selfish interest in being partnered with them. They're setting themselves up for that. It just may be by their own ignorance or their whatever it is. I'm not even making. I wouldn't even want to fully make a malevolent, conspiratorial case against those that are seeking to feed their families out there, trying to maraud. See, I get a little help companies. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people out there that are trying to help businesses that can't help themselves, and they're doing it through capital, whereas others do it through education. One thing I want to say just for the layperson listening to this, the EBITDA, right? It's interest, like write-downs, like amortizing over X amount of period. If you get a piece of some type of liability on the balance sheet, you could amortize that income down over a period of time. So showing less, or I'm sorry, when you're adding it back in, you're adding back in the earnings that ultimately are a cost. And same with like depreciation. And of course, it's before tax. So it doesn't necessarily mean there's enough working capital but what the EBITDA, from my understanding, at least at this juncture, it's giving us an understanding of the economic power, the potential power of the machine. Where I think, and this is just something we can explore in further episodes, it can, because it's a partial truth, meaning it's partially true in the sense that the business is making, it has this cash flow earnings before we have this opportunity to write down the depreciating of the asset. All of these tax incentives that the government's created to keep us working and mobile and creating value for all the customers of the country, of the company, which is us, right? So it reveals economic power where I think, and so it's a partial truth because the money's there and then it's not there. Where I think it becomes a negative is when it becomes a marketing tool and a sales tool. Example, think that behavior you talked about earlier about I want to get ready to sell my company, so I'm going to make it look as the most beautiful pig possible, lipstick all over the pig, and sell it as a horse, as a prize winning horse, but it's a pig that looks like a horse. I see psychologically that kind of deteriorate the founding spirit of the people that sell the business, and then they become salespeople for the people that they now work for, which are the people with the money. So I think when taken too far, it becomes a marketing term, a sales terminology. And I think Charlie and the like have issue with that. Essentially, you're taking something that can infer productivity or production power, right? The ability of a business to make money, to produce output, economic output. Like, okay, earnings are growing. We're a machine. Management is taking the right amount of risk. They have enough liabilities on the balance sheet, of assets. There's so much to the EBITDA number. But when it becomes this marketing tool or this sales tool, I think it starts. I'm just curious what your thoughts are in closing on that. It just becomes this digression.
Yeah, I think in honor of Charlie, what I think everything that you explained is, from a financial standpoint, the accurate description of why he thinks EBITDA is bullshit earnings. But I think there's another piece to it. Number one, I think that the organizations that love to use this number as a piece of valuation, at least the ones that come to my mind, is that they can capitalize these organizations, because what they're looking to do is take the capital out. So they can lend capital temporarily to fill the holes that might exist because everything's been amortized,
Yes.
everything's been depreciated, everything. They don't really care about that. But the biggest thing that comes to mind when I think of EBITDA is that it's an anti-people valuation. It just doesn't take into account all the negatives that happen to people as a result of, to your point, not looking at the balance sheet properly, because this is how people get fired. It's how companies downsize their employee size, right? The number of employees that they have, because they don't take all of these things into account. It can look really great on paper, but the reality of cash flow, the reality of what the real capitalization of a organization looks like, it's not real. And so you can look at that number all you want. It can look great, but if it's all because of depreciation and all the backhanded calculations that happen as a result of it that make it look great, that's great if you have, and to your point earlier, this is why companies end up selling to these organizations, because they get themselves in that situation where that's the only way they can survive, or that's the only way they can create success, is to take on the additional capital that is based on a valuation that leans in their favor because of, frankly, the mistakes that they've made financially that get covered up by the EBITDA approach.
You just laid it in a simple analogy. If there's a difference between me buying a suit for $2,000 cash and me buying a suit on a credit card for $2,000. In the short run, I'm gonna look and feel as though that I wear that suit. In the long run, if I don't do certain things to make sure I paid for that suit that I bought on that credit card, now it's $9,000. And so the risk return, the long term, short term, the EBITDA is the short term orientation, which I could use the credit card. The long term orientation is like, I bought it cash. Well, who did I have to be to save up for the cash? I had to be a person that was prudent, was long term vision. Anyway, just that's like an analogy. Maybe that helps the audience, because these can be fairly esoteric.
Confusing. Yeah.
Yeah, but good. Let's rate. Well, this is what Charlie's done for us, so let's do that for the audience. In closing, Brian, I guess I want one thing. If you met Charlie, when you meet Charlie in the ether, heaven, what are you going to say to him?
I think I would be most interested in finding out what it was like to be someone's friend and business partner for as long as him and Charlie worked together. You know, for me, life is about people, business is about people. I'd be curious about that friendship the most, you know, just how they operated. You know, it's funny, man. We talk about remote working or remote, you know, people that work remote. You know, Charlie lived in California and Warren lived in Omaha. They were the most successful,
Yeah.
you know, people that
Yeah.
did work together, and that they did it back in the day when there was no technology. And I don't assume that Warren and Charlie were, you know, hooking up on Zoom meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning, you know, down to their final days together. But I'd be interested in that, man. Like, you know, what was it like? What were some of his favorite things about Warren? What were the things that drove him nuts about Warren? You know, we all do life and business and everything together, and I think there's so much to learn from, like, you know, the people who has successfully did it for as long as they did it together. um you know, people always say, like, you know, they look at athletes and say, oh man, this athlete played for this long and never had any issues. And you know, look at these two guys, man. I mean, you know, they met in 1959. So what, 64 years they spent together, you know. And to me, like, you know, that's no different than a 64-year marriage. If I were to meet somebody who was married for 64 years, I'd want to know how they did it. And, you know, from the standpoint, I believe that if you can figure out how they did it as friends and business partners, that the rest of the business stuff would be easy.
It's a good point. Wow.